The railway to Wick and Thurso is Britain's farthest north by some considerable margin. It runs for 161 miles from the Highland capital to the old county town of Caithness. Adjacent to Platform 5 at Inverness Station is the modern signalling centre. The Inverness area is controlled by conventional colour lights, whilst alongside a second signalman is responsible for the far north and Kyle of Lochaush lines, controlled by radio.
5789, got your message.
In February 1989, the original 1862 Ness viaduct was swept away by torrential floodwater. The modern replacement cost £2.5 million and opened in May 1990. During the intervening 15 months, a special bus service was operated between Inverness and Dingwall to connect with Far North and Kyle of Lochaush trains. Although rail services now run to Inverness again, our journey begins at Dingwall, the first section having already been covered by our SkyTrain production.
2258, hold receive for the Dingwall Invergordon token. Over.
Dingwall is 18.5 miles from Inverness and is, of course, the junction for the Kyle of Lochaush line. Most services are now formed of Class 156 super sprinters, although one train on the Kyle line is still loco-hauled. The radio signalling, or RETB, was first introduced from Dingwall to Kyle in October 1984. It followed on the North Line a year later and was extended to Inverness in August 1988. The Kyle of Lochaush line diverges to the left. It opened to Stromeferry in August 1870, and incidentally to Kyle in 1897. This section of the Far North Line had opened 7 years earlier, in March 1863, as far as Invergordon.
Double 258, now clear at Dingwall. Over.
Roger, 258 out.
Having passed the Dingwall Loop Clear marker board, driver John Bloor informs Railcom Inverness. For the first 15 miles or so, the line follows a coastal route alongside the Cromarty Firth. In the distance, you can just see the bridge carrying the main A9 trunk road to the north, crossing the Cromarty Firth from the Black Isle. We're now on a rising gradient of 1 in 100. The Inverness and Ross-shire Railway had reached Dingwall from Inverness in June 1862. The company's independence was short-lived, however, for within the month it merged with the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction Railway. We're now approaching Farthest level crossing, the station of which closed in 1960. Now the line falls gently at 1 in 600 towards Edmonton. A permanent way speed restriction of 20 miles per hour begins here. The engineers, having had possession of the line overnight, have replaced some 300 yards of track following the mechanical excavation of dirty ballast. Slight lowering of the track bed has also taken place to ensure adequate clearance of the overbridge. Permanent way maintenance staff, often out in the very worst of weather, are the unsung heroes of the railway. Roughly 70 trackmen based at 7 locations along the far north line are responsible for its day-to-day upkeep. Every yard of track is patrolled at least once a week. In addition to this, an annual inspection is made specifically to look for items needing renewal. In the case of sleepers, the economical method employed north of Inverness is called patching, whereby every third sleeper is renewed on a rotating basis. Normally, sprinters achieve the line's maximum overall line speed of 75 miles per hour along here. Edmonton Station closed in 1960. There isn't a loop here, in spite of the loop clear marker boards. It's simply an RETB intermediate section, mainly used southbound to allow trains to proceed from Invergordon, even if they are unable to obtain the Dingwall token, for example due to a Kyle of Locharsh train. The white cross on a blue background is an automatic warning system cancellation marker. In other words, it means that the AWS is not applicable in this direction. We're now arriving at Alness Station, nowadays little more than a platform. Originally, it boasted no less than 3. You can clearly see the difference in height and length of the original platform. Alness had been closed to passengers in June 1960, but reopened in 1973 during the North Sea oil boom that brought much employment and new housing along the Cromarty Firth. It's just 3 miles from here to Invergordon on a slightly falling gradient. To our left is milepost 29, measured from Inverness. The concrete overbridge carries the Alness bypass, yet another new section of the A9 trunk road which goes all the way to John O'Groats via Wick. As the road has become ever straighter and faster, the railway has inevitably lost local business. ScotRail director Cyril Bleasdale categorises the Far North line, amongst others, as being principally for tourists. We're now on the outskirts of Invergordon. The road to our right, sandwiched between the railway and the Cromarty Firth, is the local B road. There is still a fair amount of oil platform servicing and repair work carried out here, although the boom peaked in the mid-1980s. The sidings are not regularly used. Invergordon Station's up platform has an unusually ornate awning, supported by floral cast iron brackets, unfortunately the victim of a recent fire. This is the town that hit national headlines with the mutiny here during the First World War.
258 now has permission to pass the stopboard in Invergordon and proceed to the stopboard at Fairn. Over.
The single-line electronic token is received by radio along with permission to proceed to Fairn. The two signs beneath the stopboard indicate radio channels. VHF band 3 on the left and band 2 on the right. Older radios, such as on Class 37 locals, are Band 2, whereas newer ones, as fitted to the Sprinters, use the more efficient Band 3. As part of the Ross-Shire Extension Act, the 15 miles from Invergordon to Meikle Ferry opened in June 1864. Even at this stage, the ultimate destination was Wick and Thurso. In fact, one of the earliest railway schemes of all in the north of Scotland was in 1845, when a local line had been proposed to connect the Caithness county town of Wick with the second largest town of Thurso.
Double 258, now clear Invergordon. Over.
Yeah, double 258 out.
There are various ancillary lines around Invergordon. To the left at milepost 32, this one ran to a distillery, as does the one to the right. This line ran to the old aluminium works. Above it, the concrete overbridge carried a conveyor belt from there to the jetty. The line from the right is also associated with the aluminium works. The last line converging from the right belongs to British Pipe Coaters Limited. This is another 1960 station closure, Delny. Just to the left, you can see the old station building of Kildare. This was Nig Station, the tiny village of the same name being no less than 3.5 miles away. The level crossing is under temporary manual control, whilst essential repair work is undertaken. This is Fern, 41 miles from Inverness and on a rising gradient of 1 in 300.
Double 258, now arrived at Fern. All in sent return token. Over.
Roger, press send until you receive forward token 2258.
Double 258, now the Fern Tane token on display. Over.
2258, you have permission to proceed. Fair to Tane, over. 795, over. 795, press and receive, over. Girls, token on display. 5795, you have permission to proceed after the arm, over.
The railway is now beginning to curve northwestwards in the direction of Tane.
Double 258, now clear. Fern. Over.
You're number 258 out. Roger, number 201 out. Joe is 006. Master on the shield up for your master, over. You're 2006 out.
Our next station stop, as they say, is Tane. The layout, building and platforms at Tane still give a sense of its importance. The grey sandstone building is listed for preservation, and it's also one of a number of stations en route still to retain its old wooden goods shed. The station is still staffed during the day, and the town itself is within easy walking distance.
Operator guy, proceed to Lairg, over.
Understood. Over and out.
The rising gradient immediately heading northwest from Tain is 1 in 300.
Go ahead. Parker board, Georgemas up and down, pressing sand, over. Roger, number 215. Five, I have a mark display, over. Roger, number 215, out.
Double 258. Now clear. Tain. Over.
You're number 258, out.
We've now left the Cromarty Firth behind us, and to the north lies the Dornoch Firth.
Number 201, over.
This is the Glenmorangie Distillery, home of one of today's most popular malt whiskies. Stretching out across the Dornoch Firth in the distance is the new A9 road bridge. The cause of much controversy in the 1980s was the proposal to include the railway in this scheme as well. The road journey, formerly via Bonar Bridge, is now cut by some 19 miles, and the saving by rail would be a total of 27 miles. The scheme so far has come to nothing, but at least the new road bridge has been specifically aligned to incorporate any future rail crossing. Just beyond the approach road to the aforementioned Dornoch Firth Bridge is the site of Meikle Ferry Station. It was established here in June 1864 and for 4 months was the temporary terminus. After the line had opened to Bonar Bridge in October, the ferry across the Dornoch Firth and the station were little used, forcing its premature closure in 1869. We're now heading northwest towards Bonar Bridge. A brief climb of around 1 in 150 peaks just before Editon. Editon was one of the many station closures of 1960. Just beyond it is the Balblair Distillery. Between Easterfern and Westerfern, the road comes right to the water's edge, forcing the railway engineers Joseph Mitchell and Company to build a 2/5 of a mile long causeway across the water. Just beyond it, there was at one time a station to serve Fern Lodge. As we approach our guide, we can make out the headland jutting out 3/4 of a mile into the Dornoch Firth. It was the narrow channel thus created that enabled Bonar Bridge to be built here, replacing in turn the previous crossing point at Oikel Bridge, a further 60 miles inland. "57.5 miles from Inverness, Bonar Bridge Station was the northernmost extremity of the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction Railway. The station was renamed Ardguy in 1977, reflecting its true location. The extension of the line from here to Brora was authorised on the 29th of June 1865, the same day that the Highland Railway Company was born. The Highland name was adopted following the amalgamation of the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction and the Inverness and Perth Junction railways. Now all lines centred on Inverness were owned and operated by the one concern. This section of line from Ardguy to Brora was promoted by the Sutherland Railway Company. Taking just under 3 years, it was in fact only built as far as Golspie and opened in April 1868. We now cross the River Carron. Climbing at 150, on the skyline is Carbersdale Castle. Built in 1912 for the Dowager Duchess of Sutherland, it was modelled on a French chateau. Today, as a youth hostel, it provides the railway at nearby Coleraine with a valuable source of income. Coleraine Station in Ross-shire was a later addition to the railway, opening in July 1870 to give rail access to residents on the west side of the Kyle of Sutherland. mile from here to Invershyn in Sutherland is one of British Rail's shortest runs between stations. The wrought iron girder bridge over the mouth of the River Oikel, the Kyle of Sutherland, has a single span of 230 feet. It's still the most convenient crossing place for many miles, and drivers have to keep a watchful eye for those who cross illegally by foot. Invershyn is still a request stop, serving the nearby hotel. Ever since the establishment of Bonar Bridge, road traffic has continued towards the north via the Dornoch Peninsula. It had been proposed from the very start that the railway should follow suit on a course roughly in line with the 1980s proposals. The fact that it did not is largely due to one man, the 3rd Duke of Sutherland. The major shareholder in the Sutherland Railway, he was a very far-thinking and benevolent man. Born in 1828, he inherited the dukedom in 1865 upon the death of his father. Over 1 million acres of the county passed into his ownership, and he reasoned that if the railway could be built via Lairg, an important crossroads, it would have the desired effect of opening up some of the interior of eastern Sutherland and bringing prosperity to a region hitherto lacking modern amenities. This is why, even today, we're heading inland on the 33-mile Lairg route, along here being one of the most expensive sections to build on the whole line, climbing initially at 1 in 72 through solid rock above the Ochani Glen, or valley of the River Shin, down to our left. To the right can be seen the BP oil terminal here at Lairg. Lairg station is still staffed. The up platform has had to be staggered in order to raise its height whilst retaining the original Sutherland Railway buildings. The station still retains much character. The old coal yard and goods shed are still used. In the down direction, the level crossing is activated by the driver depressing a plunger on the platform. The village itself is some 1.5 miles away. For the next 2 miles, turning east, we climb steadily at 1 in 70 to Lairg summit.
5723, so welcome over net, and that's on my guy, Lairg engine position. Welcome to proceed over. Continue on Newton back up to limit of this engineer's position. The loop to your marker board at Lairg to the loop to your marker board at our guy. You have permission to proceed with your engineer's position. You're required to surrender this position not later than 1C40 1340. Over. 5723, from the net, Mrs. Over.
2258. Near clear Lairg. Over.
2258 then. 44, join the net. Go ahead. Roger, number 244. Best stand to forward, over.
Lairg summit, 488 feet above sea level. The line now follows the southeasterly course of the River Fleet to Rogart on a continuously descending gradient at an average of 1 in 80. This is a Cayley crossing. It's shown on the gradient profile as having once had a passing loop, but there's little evidence of it. The automatic warning system and the fixed distance signal warn of our approach to Roggett. This bridge carries us over the River Fleet. Roggett Station was actually one of those closed in 1960, but was reprieved 9 months later. The building's more akin to a cottage than a business premise. It overlooks one of Scotland's longest passing loops, witness to the fact that at 77 miles, it's virtually halfway between Inverness and the far north. Roggett is another example of a station that was located some distance from the community, although inevitably some development occurred nearby. As well as a post office and general store, there's a weekly cattle market right alongside.
Down 258, now clear, Roggett. Over.
Roger, number 258 out.
Maintaining a fairly level course from Roggett through Strathfleet, we now pass milepost 80. Just beyond, there's a half-mile 1 in 70 climb to the old Mound station, followed by a similar fall. past the abandoned bridge abutments of the A9, the old station comes into view. It was from the branch platform to the right that the Dornoch Light Railway ran. The old line descended sharply to the mound, the name given to the half-mile-long causeway across the head of Loch Fleet. The Dornoch branch shared it with the A9 main road. The Mound Station and the light railway closed in June 1960, having opened only 58 years earlier in 1902. It was undoubtedly a picturesque line, running alongside Loch Fleet, and there are still plenty of signs of its short existence. The mid-1980s proposals for the Dornoch cut-off could have seen this trackbed reinstated. Dornoch Station survives relatively unscathed. Since closure, it's been used as an antique shop, a surveyor's office, and now a takeaway. Kirkton level crossing is on virtually level ground, the line now running through a wide open plain, allowing trains to run at maximum line speed. After the scenic but circuitous Lairg detour, the line is now back on course for the north. It's here at Golspie, 84 miles from Inverness, that the Sutherland Railway stopped. From now onwards, the line was built privately to Helmsdale, a distance of 17 miles, by the Duke of Sutherland himself. On the modern bridge in front of us is the tablet of Aberdeen granite that was erected on the original structure. It was a tribute to the Duke of Sutherland by all those who built the line, to record their sense of his patriotic munificence and zeal in promoting the industry and progress of the north of Scotland, and in testimony of their respectful affection. Dated 1871. The third Duke of Sutherland had borne the cost of building the railway entirely by himself. He employed local men instead of traditional navvies because of the depressed state of the East Coast fishing industry at the time. From Golspie, the Duke had planned to build the railway along the shoreline in front of his magnificent residence, Dunrobin Castle. Others saw this as a grave mistake, however, and persuaded him to take this course, rising up at 1 in 60 behind the town and his estate to his own private station at Dunrobin. During the summer months, the Queen of Scots luxury train makes a weekly call at Dunrobin for a guided tour around the castle. Although not shown in the public timetable, service trains now stop at this private halt by request. Come rain or shine, the predominantly American tourists are personally greeted by the 3rd Duke of Sutherland's great-great-grandson, Lord Strathnaver. Dunrobin Castle is the ancestral home of the Dukes of Sutherland, and as such is one of Britain's oldest continuously inhabited houses, dating in part back to the 14th century. But what sort of man was the 3rd Duke of Sutherland?
Above all else, he was a developer. He wanted to change the face of Sutherland, and after the clearances in 1810 to 20, he set about rebuilding the entire county, something which is often forgotten. He spent literally hundreds of millions of pounds building the railway, harbours, bridges, schools, hospitals, whole villages, many of the shooting lodges which are still around, and really created the infrastructure of the county as it exists today.
The Duke obviously liked railways, but was he actually a railway enthusiast?
Yes, very much so. What he really enjoyed doing was driving his own train with his own carriage up and down his own railway line, dressed in traditional train driver's costume, and burning the coal that had come from his own coal mines in England in the train while he was doing it.
For the first 6 months, the Duke of Sutherland's railway ran in isolation between Dunrobin and West Helmsdale, the two extremities not yet being complete. Because of the railway's separation, the Duke's original 240 tank engine had to be conveyed the last 2 miles from Golspie by road. The laborious process involved no fewer than 200 men laying wooden planks in long sections in order to stop the road engine and bogie sinking into the mud. On the 1st of November 1870, the little engine began hauling passenger trains over the 14.5 miles between Dunrobin and West Helmsdale. Brora was the only intermediate station, but the Duke allowed his train to pick up and set down anywhere along the line. We are now on the outskirts of Brora on a 1 in 200 falling gradient alongside the North Sea. In addition to the Duke's own newly acquired saloon, a 3rd-class coach was hired from the Highland Railway, along with 4 wagons and a brake van for goods traffic. The 2 speed limits differentiate between passenger and freight trains.
Go ahead. 2006, Donny, I am line a Kyle, President, Return for Kyle Token, over. Roger, 2006.
We're now crossing high above the River Brora, which flows through the centre of the town. The original 1871 building was replaced in this no-nonsense style in 1895. Brora is one of the most important stations on the line, and as such is still staffed. The sidings are used by engineers, and the goods shed until recently housed a permanent way trolley. It's just under 11 miles from Brora to Helmsdale, and the railway follows the lie of the land. The only intermediate halt was Loth, almost exactly halfway.
Double 258. Now clear, Brora. Over.
Check number 258 out.
There's a gradient here of 1 in 100 up to the bridge crossing the River Loth. Following the bridge, we descend at 1 in 180 past the old station of Loth itself. It served a small, scattered community, the nearest dwelling being half a mile away, and succumbed to closure in 1960. This is Portgar. Along here, near Gartymore, was the site of West Helmsdale Station, for 6 months the temporary terminus of the Duke of Sutherland's railway from Dunrobin. On the coast in the background is Helmsdale itself. In May of 1871, both extremities of the line were opened, Golspie to Dunrobin, and from here to Helmsdale proper. The railway was now just over 100 miles long from Inverness. Heading away from the coast, we climb at 1 in 60 towards Helmsdale Station. Since the introduction of the Class 156 Sprinters, there are now 4 trains per day in each direction, more than ever before.
Double 258. Now the Helmsdale 49 token on display. Over.
The Duke of Sutherland's railway ended at Helmsdale. The final stride to the north was made by the Sutherland and Caithness Railway. Again, the Duke of Sutherland featured prominently. He was the chief promoter and major shareholder, the Highland Railway having the second largest shareholder. The preferred route was the coastal one, via the important fishing villages of Dunbeath and Leicester, and the most direct route as the crow flies. However, a crow's one thing, a steam train quite another. Time and again, surveyors struggled to find a practical path over the Ord of Caithness. Today's route tells the story. It could not be had. Instead, we're heading inland, northwest up the Strath of Kildonan, alongside the River Helmsdale. For the tourist, the line is all the better for this inland incursion through largely unspoilt territory. The main road has taken the time-honoured coastal route, which, even today, is not an easy one. The only road in the valley is single track with passing places. It's pretty well uphill, all the way from Helmsdale to the County March summit beyond Forsenard, with a ruling gradient of 1 in 60 as the country becomes increasingly wilder. It was in the Strath of Kildonan that the Duke of Sutherland tried to establish a gold mine after the valley had experienced a minor gold rush in 1869. We're now slowing down for the level crossing at Kildonan. The station at milepost 111 opened with the rest of the line from Helmsdale on the 28th of July, 1874. It was located here purely to serve a shooting lodge, situated about half a mile away. This is where Borrable platform stood until 1965. It served nearby Borrable Lodge. This is where we crossed the River Helmsdale. You can see the reversal of the 1 in 60 climb to a 1 in 100 fall towards Kinbrace as the line heads north. The cottage-style building at Kinbrace is now out of use, and a concrete colour gaslit shelter has been provided instead. Compared to Kildonan, Kinbrace is a hive of activity. There's a general store and sub-post office, which, like the railway, serves a wide community. The ramshackle snow fences along the trackside remind passengers of the severity of winters in these remote parts. This is Forcenard, which consists of just 4 or 5 dwellings, a shop, hotel and unstaffed railway station. In 1898, a line was authorised from Forcenard northwards through Strathalladale towards the coast. This was the Forcenard, Melvick and Portskerra Light Railway. Although materials and plant were transported here by the Highland Railway, construction was never actually started. Here, the single-track road heading north parts company from our single-track railway heading northeast, as we set off towards the boundary between Sutherland and Caithness, the County March. Every so often, we pass the ruins of an isolated cottage beside the track. These were provided for the men who maintained the line far from civilization. Life here was always entirely dependent on the trains. Some cottages were actually built in order to house the extremely isolated navvies whilst building the line. The climb up towards the line's summit is mostly at 1:60. For many miles on either side of the County March, there were treacherous peat bogs known as flows, some as much as 40 feet deep, over which the navvies had to lay the track bed. The basic construction involved excavating to a depth of 3 or 4 feet, with the turf cut off the top being thrown in again as a foundation. Gravel and sand laid above formed the road. Coming into view now is the County March summit, 129.5 miles from Inverness and 708 feet above sea level. It was near the County March in January 1978 that a train with 70 passengers was stranded for 20 hours during the worst blizzards for 30 years. 4 of the 5 coaches had derailed in heavy snowdrifts. The train crew managed to fight their way along here to Altnabrake station, where they raised the alarm. The following morning, the passengers were airlifted to the safety of Wick Airport by helicopter. Altnabrake, set in the midst of 21,000 acres of peat moss, is one of the most inaccessible stations in Scotland. The PW vehicle is a prototype on trial here to assess the practicality of inspecting remote stretches of line by means of rail instead of by foot. Remnants of this steam watering hole still survive, but the nearby hotel hasn't, closing in the early 1980s. There's one factor in the Far North Line's tenuous survival that's not generally realised. After having already committed to the building of the line in standard gauge, the Duke of Sutherland had discovered the technology of narrow gauge railways. He openly confessed that he was so impressed by this alternative and the economies to be had by a suggested 2 feet 6 inch gauge that he would have unhesitatingly adopted it. How fortuitous that he discovered the technology just too late. What chance would there be of this line still being here today on anything other than the National Railway gauge? A close call indeed. Scots Calder, like Altnabrake, is still open for business as an unstaffed halt, but it serves only a scattered community. There's little trace of Halkirk Station, closed in 1960. It was just over a quarter of a mile from the sizable village. Just beyond, we encounter a 1 in 75 rising gradient to Britain's most northerly junction. Georgemas Junction, 147.25 miles from Inverness, was sited here largely as an economy measure, being on an already existing road and providing reasonable lie of land for the building of the 2 branches. The area was known locally as Georgemas, or Georgemas Hill, after the agricultural market held here each year on St. George's Day. The building to our right was constructed to house the section's PW trolley. The Thurso branch converges from the left. Waiting in platform 2 is the Orcadian Intercity Land Cruise train, formed of first-class Mark I coaches. As its name suggests, the passengers are off visiting the Orkney Isles. The station building is used by train crews on layovers. On 1 or 2 diagrams, this amounts to a few hours. Now the 4-car Sprinter is split into 2 halves, one for Wick and one for Thurso. We're taking the Thurso portion, which will reverse out of the junction. As we've seen, the 6 3/4 mile Thurso branch diverges immediately to the west of Georgemas and curves sharply northwest. The layout facilitated the original local services that ran between the 2 largest Caithness towns. These ended even before the 1960 closures. At first, the branch drops steadily downwards at an average of 1 in 100. It follows the course of the River Thurso all the way to the terminus. The mileposts start from 0 at Georgemas. Two months after the line opened, Hoy Station was established by the approaching level crossing. It gave the townfolk of Halkirk, 1 1/4 miles away, access to local trains, as well as those on the main line. History has shown what a great opportunity was missed in siting the junction so near, yet so far, from the 4th largest community in Caithness. Indeed, Halkirk would still have a station today, had it been the site of the junction. We're now crossing to the west bank of the River Thurso at Todholes. And so we approach Britain's most northerly station, 154 miles from Inverness. When the railway was first built, Thurso's population was 3,500. Today, it's 10,000, and Thurso now generates more custom than Wick. Much of this business comes from the Orkney Isles, via nearby Scrapster Harbour, and also from the Dounreay nuclear power station. The original single platform became an island when the second track was laid in 1939. Still boasting considerable railway infrastructure, complete with timber goods shed, the sidings are, however, rarely used these days. The recently refurbished building of local sandstone dates right back to the line's inauguration in 1874. There were 3 intermediate stations on the Wick line. Bower, just here, 2 3/4 miles from Georgemas, Wotton and Bilston. All 3 were closed on the same day as the 17 other stations on the Far North Line, back on June the 13th, 1960. The 14 1/4 mile Wick branch, although strictly speaking the main line, was relatively easy to build with no major earthworks. Over its southeasterly route from Georgemas, it descends a total of 160 feet, firstly alongside Loch Wotton, and then following the course of the Wick River. This was Wotton Station, the small village lying to the south of Loch Wotton, exactly 1 mile distant. This was Bilston Station, which served not even a village. It was built to accommodate a local landowner who was a director of the railway company. We now cross the Wick River. The coastal town of Leicester eventually got its rail connection, but from the north and not from the south. The Wick and Leicester Light Railway survived barely 41 years, opening in July 1903 and closing in April 1944. The light railway converged from the south just here. 161.25 miles from Inverness, the familiar outline of Wick's famous train shed, built of Caithness flagstone, comes into view. The old county town has always been the main fishing port of Caithness. The population of 9,000 compares with 7,500 when the railway arrived. It was on the left of the former island platform that the Leicester trains once stopped. The goods yard has not only survived, but was, at the time of filming, still officially open for business. Like its twin Thurso, the station building at Wick received its first major facelift in 1985, but is still almost entirely original. Testimony indeed to the Victorian craftsmanship of those employed building Britain's farthest north railway. We're now approaching the swing bridge at Clachnahary. Here is the start of the Caledonian Canal, which runs from east coast to west coast via Loch Ness, Loch Oich and Loch Lochy. At the southern end of the very same canal is the swing bridge at Banavie on the Mallaig line. The speed restriction is 10 miles per hour. The fixed distance denotes that we are near to the end of the line.
Around the next bend is Loch Eelside. The steam excursions don't normally stop there, and for that matter, neither do the diesels. Loch Eelside is shown in the normal timetable as a request stop, probably due to the fact that you can count the number of houses here on two hands. We're now 2.5 miles out from Glenfinnan, and at the highest point on the whole line, 361 feet above sea level.